I would like to welcome Albert Wolszon on the stage. Here he is. And Albert will tell you quite a lot about design systems in a large Flutter app from the developer's perspective.
Okay, you can hear me. Hey, good evening, everyone. I see that some of you already have a beer, LeanCode branded. Hope you like it. So, my name is Albert Wolszon, and this is my talk called Design System in a Large Flutter App from the developer's perspective. Let's start with my introduction. So, I'm 21, currently based in Warsaw. I'm a Flutter developer since the version 1.0, the very first stable release of Flutter. Is there anyone who maybe remembers that version? Okay, there are some people, nice. And in the Credit Agricole project, I serve as a UI developer. As a Flutter developer, focus heavily on the UI in the overall design squad. And you can also find me on Twitter under Albert_Wolszon. Okay, so in this talk, I'll be talking about design systems and their components, the challenges that we encountered, and how to develop design systems and help your fellow developers in using them. But let's start with the design system. What's a design system? As Wikipedia says, that's a set of interconnected patterns shared within an organization that build its image, be it spoken language in communications, branding, colors, and typography, or the UI elements that are used in different projects for this organization. Some of the companies have made their design systems public, and those are some of the examples. The Google's material design system, the Stack Overflow's stacks, the Audi or Atlassian's design systems, the well-known in the mobile world, Apple's human interface guidelines, or the IBM's Carbon. Those are all public. And okay, let's start with some context of the project. You have already heard many stuff about that, but it's really important to understand what was the scale for this project, because it's the scale actually that matters on what challenges do you actually face during the development and during providing so much UI stuff for all the other people. So in this project, there were around 20 Flutter developers at one time, and there was around 30 maybe more Flutter developers in general during the whole project. And more than 200 people, not only developers, were involved in the project. So people like, product owners, testers, translators. And during over the past year, we made around 5,000 merge requests, actually more than that, and 800 of them were authored by the overall design team. And this all yielded more than 16,000 commits, if you were interested in that. All developers were divided into squads. I was in the squad 01, as you could already hear about those. There's also this framework squad that was a little bit more special, just as the squad 01 from the other ones, as the other ones were more business related. And each squad was rather independent in their work, with the exception of those two, obviously. Okay. Our squad made more than 200 UI components, UI widgets, starting from the very small and really small atoms and molecules to very complex organisms and templates. And each of those widgets that you see on the screen and much more had their own corresponding page in a storybook. But let's face this question: how to deliver components enabling squads to create consistent screens quickly? How to do it in a good way without problems, without a big amount of problems? Let's start from the bottom up. your design team, not the developers team, but the design team, shall have already prepared some kind of a style guide at this point, some document in Figma that defines the most basic stuff for a design. So that's stuff like the typography, what fonts are used, what styles are used, the colors, and other design constants such as the box shadows, sizings, grids, stuff like that. And it's also a place where they, and I mean everyone actually from business developers, should think about other things like accessibility features. You know, different people need increased text scale, so it affects the font styles, high contrast settings, maybe the dark mode as it was already mentioned, and it all is related with those basics. And for developers, because we are developers, we need to somehow provide all of this stuff to the developers. We need to enforce it, enforce the typography that is used among all the widgets, all the screens, and colors. Because if you enforce it, if you don't let developers use anything they like, it just prevents from some errors. I mean, visual errors, that something looks bad or something is not as the designers intended, making it really easy to spot and fix inconsistencies, both in the end-user application and in designs. And this is what we actually did to achieve this. We simply extended some of the default Flutter classes used for visual stuff like the text style or the color. And what we did was create a subclass for this. All of those classes had private constructors, which meant that only the CABP common UI package was able to create instances of this class. Like here, we had this, CA text styles with some of the styles, and the same thing for the colors. We had the color palette that was the common UI package that created the instances of various different colors. And here is like 1/3 of all the colors that were defined, all of the abstract colors. And yeah, when we have a color palette like that, just like the Flutter materials actually color scheme, we have access to the abstract colors. I mean, we have access to the name of a color inside the color scheme, like a brand primary, brand secondary, and other different colors. So we can, assign a concrete color to it, like the actual hex values. But it also enables us to create other color themes, like the dark theme, and in our case, actually 4 color schemes. That's the light and the dark theme for the retail user, and also the same light and dark theme, but for the business context consumer. And even a simple widget as text also was our widget, was our custom-made widget that accommodated those types. Like, we only accepted the CA text style and CA color, not just any color. So really, when developers needed to use some text with illegal color, they couldn't do so because of that, because of those compile time errors that they were getting in their IDEs. And actually, what's a nice finding is, during the development of this project, we actually saw that the color and the text style are actually 2 separate things that are really more convenient to have them separately than inside, than having the color inside the style. It's just more convenient. Okay, creating widgets. When you want to have a widget, you have to build its widget tree, and it's usually a widget inside another widget, which is really similar to a concept that atomic design describes. Okay, atomic design. Is there anyone who have heard of atomic design? Good, nice. I see plenty of hands here. Atomic design is a methodology of creating design systems. It describes not only how to create, designs having the end screen in your head, but also having the small components in mind. And in atomic design, you basically split all of your components, all of your UI parts into those 5 categories: the atoms, molecules, organism, templates, and pages. And let's describe what are those on a little bit better example. So here, on the left side, you have an atom that's actually something that we call a navigation icon. And this is the smallest independent thing that you can have in a design. You can't split it. I mean, technically you can, because that's a background and icon. But in the terms of design, there is no just this circle or just this icon without the background that you have on designs. It's the smallest thing. And when you put it with some title, some border, and probably some box shadow, you have a molecule, something that gives you more information to the user. It gives more information. It plays some role in the UI. And get some of those cards, put them in a carousel with some fancy physics. At close icon, the title, another box shadow, and you have an organism. And what is organism? Organism is just a piece of UI that's contextual. It has its own context, and if you would have some random screen, and you would put this organism on top of it, the user wouldn't be really confused. The visual independence between what is below this organism and this actual component is clearly visible. There's also a template, which is something that sticks everything together, and pages, which are basically, pages, your screens in your application. Another thing, ambiguity. There was very big amount of ambiguities during the development of this project, which were really a pain point. Sometimes you have some different people have different ideas of specification. So, you understand something this way, your designer or product owner or whoever understand it in a different way, or maybe it is because the specification changed in time. Sometimes you have those ad hoc calls when you want to clarify something, talk about how some edge case should be addressed, but you don't make notes. You just remember it. You implement the change, and then this knowledge of the origin of this change is lost. That's just basically wasting time on searching for the specs or fixing stuff when you have to touch it again. And that's why maintaining something like a architecture decision log of sort is important. It actually doesn't have to be something so nice as this name is. We had basically a markdown document that we're laying inside our repository that described all of the majority of the changes that we introduced to some more abstract stuff, so that whenever there was a question why something works like this, why something behaves like this, we always had the answer, and we didn't need to roll back this change. Just don't ask yourself why anymore. Future-proofing what you create at this scale for that many people, for that many man-hours, is also crucial. You don't always have the whole specification at your hand. You don't always have the end picture in your head, in the specifications, in designs, in user stories, and you sometimes need to think ahead of what actually the project needs, of how actually some components should work, behave, look like. And the example of such thing could be motion design. Motion design is something that wasn't from the very beginning in our project. You know, when you have a button that just changes the color of a text, color of a background, it's really easy to implement motion design later. But when you have, you know, this, as you could maybe already see on this on the screen on the second row, when you have this big start page that this whole page is basically animated, the motion plays a crucial role here. And as a Flutter developer, you may know how more or less you should develop stuff so it is easy to animate it later. You know, using the stack widgets with positioned different translate widgets. Because later, if you wouldn't accommodate it, you would need to do refactors, and it could be, you know, a pain. Other thing is the dark mode. As I already said, there is a dark mode, actually 2 dark modes in the application, and because of the fact that we use the color schemes, those CA colors abstraction, we were able to really easily add another color palettes to the application, and thanks to this, we have this smooth transition between them. Yeah, that's how it looks. And the last thing, the text scale factor. More people use increased text scale factor on their phones than you would think. And implementing it, I mean, supporting it is also a big pain point because, you know, you have this really beautiful piece of UI, this beautiful start page, and it's all good, but then you have some elderly people that just use their phones daily, okay, but with the increased text scale, and the application is, you just can't use the application because you don't know what you are clicking at, you can't read your transactions. That's also why you need to have some stuff in the back of your head when developing stuff to communicate to designers that they should take it into account. And thanks to this, you can achieve something like this, you know, the support for some things much easier. Okay, you know, the developers are working with user stories. Those user stories have screen designs in them. But how do developers know what components to use from this design? This is a mock-up of a screen from the Figma on some other file because, you know, our Figma was really big. We had different Figma files for different squads. And the navigation for the developer in those Figma pages was actually really easy, really smooth. When a developer had their screen and they wanted to start developing it, they could simply go into Figma, click on any component they wanted. Okay, I have this screen, I want to start developing it. Okay, what's this component that I should use? Okay, I right-click on it, then I have this Go to Main Component option in the context menu. When I click on it, I'm redirected to the design system file in Figma, where I have all of the variants for this input, the one that I clicked on, and also I have the name of the component that's used in Flutter. That's how the component is named in the common UI package, and there's some more examples of that. This is just enum values for some icons. This is another component. This is yet another component, but using a named constructor. Sometimes, as a common UI developer, I had to navigate the other way around. Let's say that I had this CA scaffold panel over widget, and I wanted to see how other people use it. So, okay, I you know, found some widget. I used Control and F to find it. I know that this is some rename loan page, but I have no idea where are loans, what are those, how to find the correct screen in Figma. And we had really big amount of those screens. So this small one-liner really helps in work of a common UI developer, where I can easily see what file it is in, and also what actual screens should I look for, because we had them ordered. Okay, and this is a big chapter right here, because if I were to name one thing that improved my productivity the most during the whole development of this project, was the storybook. Why? Because storybook is a place for me as a common UI developer for the development, where I can focus only on this single component, on all of its variants, states, on all of its edge cases, for other developers to play with those components, to better understand them, so that other developers could see the widget they're about to use without even writing a line of code and doing the hot reload. Also, as our storybook was hosted on the web, on the bank's intranet, it was possible to open, different components in different Chrome tabs, so I could easily switch between those when I was showing my increments on sprint reviews. It was also a place for designers, or actually anyone to check those widgets, if they look good, if they behave correctly with the specification, and other people, maybe some social media people, could also play with those, go to the hosted storybook, use some, let's say, card for credits, put some text in it, and use it in a Facebook post. And this is actually how the storybook looked like. This is an example of the button. And if we could see the video right now. So we had this sidebar where there were many knobs, whatever knobs that we wanted to put there. We could try the different variants for a component, different states, checkboxes for the Boolean parameters. You could put different text inside them. You could also switch between the themes. This is the business theme. We had this the other sidebar with the catalog of all of the widgets. That's an example of a template, which is, it sticks everything together. This was a widget that provided information on laying out all of the other stuff depending on the height of the screen and other inputs. And another example, some other card used in carousels. We could try out the different variants for it, Okay, and that's it. If we could go back to the presentation, thank you. And all of those states are quickly accessible at the glance of your hand. You had all of those knobs on the sidebar where you could easily play with them, see if the button looks good in the primary variant, in the secondary variant, in the danger variant, if it looked good with just the emoji or on the dark background. But it also, and that's another video. It was also really helpful with the most complex widgets. What you see here, the scaffold panel over, is a very fancy name for our custom-made scaffold, which accommodated. It was basically the most complex widget inside the whole application, in the whole common UI. If we could loop it, it would be nice. We could play with it. We had different options available on the UI, and that were animated with the scrolling gestures. On different screens we had search. Some other screens didn't have this search functionality. We could have the filters, just like here. And because of this storybook, we could easily play with those, see if everything works good, if all of the mathematics behind those translations, behind those opacity calculations worked correctly. Okay, nice, thank you. Next thing, the communication. As a developer that creates widgets for 20 other Flutter developers, you need to somehow effectively communicate with all of those people. And we actually had, two types of communication. There was this kind of a real-time communication where something happened and at the point of time, and this is one of the examples is this deprecating things, as Mateusz said. We simply used Microsoft Teams, and I was just posting some important messages there with some context, what I fixed, what I removed, what I deprecated, what was introduced, if it was something that many people awaited, with some screenshots, merge requests, and this important mark which made everyone get annoyed because they got this push notification on their PC. And the other type is a persistent type of communication, because as it was with those architecture decision logs, it was also inside our repository, just basic markdown documents, where we put the documentation not regarding the specific components, but maybe on a more high level, more high abstraction level, where we could not only describe how something works, but maybe what widget to use, why should we use this one, and stuff like that. But there was also a developer-designer communication, which was a little bit more of a department than in other business squads. And there were a few things here. Formalizing each decision was really crucial. We didn't pay attention to it at the first, which was the pain that I already described, but then it was fixed. So formalizing those decisions is just helpful. Receiving updates on what components has been changed, because okay, some designers created a new widget, new component actually that you need to develop, but how do you know that there is new component? Normally we would use Jira board, but actually due to some legal issues or something like that, designers couldn't have access to those same Jira boards, so we simply used some very simple Kanban board made on Figma. And the other thing, which would be really a blessing if Figma had it, was to have some kind of a version control for components inside Figma. Figma has file version history, but that's not really helpful, because you need to see the changes of components and how the component changes in time, just like you use, Git history. So that would be really handy. And what Fiołek said, boundaries. It's, the package's name was CABP Common UI, not Common Everything. So you need to draw boundaries somewhere. In the Common UI, we were having design primitives, those basics from the style guide. We had the Common UI components, obviously. We had common animations that were coupled with the templates that accommodated them, but we didn't have the localization inside. We had just string parameters in constructors in our widgets, and we relied on those business squads to give us whatever localized string they want us to display. The validation or the repeated business logic, that's not our department. And that's what was about this more abstract stuff, the communications, other things. But what technical obstacles did we actually stumble upon? The very first, problem was choosing the storybook solution, and it was actually before I wrote any code. Um, at this point in time, there were only two solutions available on the market. That was the Storybook Flutter and the Dashbook. We checked both of those, made some proof of concept, and we decided to go with the Storybook Flutter, which was actually heavily modified to accommodate our needs, like nested components in the sidebar, the different application themes. But after this time, right now, there's actually those two new solutions available, the widget book and the Flutter book, which seem really promising on a side note, and I really root for them. And the animations, many animation challenges. This is the most complex widget that we have in the application, but not in Storybook in this isolated manner where you have only this widget. This is from the actual application where you have all of those other widgets next to it, and coming up with the way on how to develop something like that wasn't easy. It actually took like 3 weeks for the whole development in 2 points in time, because we had to refactor it some time later. Yeah, that was really hard. And actually the thing that, this drawer and this are 2 separate Flutter routes, and this doesn't really help. Because Flutter. Okay, so this is a funny thing. Flutter actually, when you put a new route in the stack, it actually cancels all gestures. So when the finger was going there, somewhere here, the Flutter said, okay, no more gesture. You can't track the finger anymore. And how we addressed it. We started with, I started with drawing all of the states that this widget should have on pieces of paper. Those are those particular states, scrolled, not scrolled, having this below top thing, collapsed, with search, without search, all of this stuff. Then, I ordered it in a manner that, resembled how it will actually look like in the application. And at this point, I could already see some, relations, how something translates into the another state, and so on. And thanks to this, thanks to splitting this problem into, smaller and smaller pieces, it was getting much easier to find the solution for this. And this is actually what Marcin Szałek addressed in his Flutter Europe talk. He's right here. I can recommend this video to you, really. If you're a Flutter developer, if you're any developer, if you're a designer, if you're just a person that lives on the planet Earth, you should watch it. And also scrolling was a very big department that was touched in this application, because those scaffolds made use of those scrolling stuff. Also carousels also had some role with, they had something to do with scrolling, because those fancy physics, etc. And touching this sliver protocols, scroll physics, controllers, positions, everything, and the gestures and the parameters that we got from it, from their callbacks, was really insightful. And this enabled us to create such beautiful translations with the help of the design team, of course, who came up with how it should look. Nice. Thankfully, there were simple obstacles like this. This is the CA button widget in action at at the beginning of the project. This is the same button that's shown in the Storybook, so on macOS, the desktop platform. And this is the very same widget that's shown in Accordion inside a mobile application on iOS. So that's the iOS platform. And this used the text button, the Flutter's material text button widget underneath, but as you could see, it's not really the same. It differs in height. So a small quiz for you. Why is it? Why does it look different on different platforms? Does anyone maybe have idea?
Text line height?
Sorry?
Text line height?
No, it's not that. But close. Yes, yes, yes. That's visual density. And yeah, it's not big of a change. So I actually didn't see it at first weeks, actually. Yeah, but I noticed it. And after that, we made changes. The visual density is used in those material widgets, like the button or the input decorators. So it's good to have that in mind. And besides that, there were also other departments of Flutter internals that were touched, or that I and other developers learned about. That the inputs decorators, the backend behind inputs, inputting the text, how it actually connects with the Swift or Kotlin side of things. For the dropdowns, there were the followers and targets for the composited transform. I didn't even know there was something like that. Now I do. The scaffolds, how they work underneath, and routes, their animations, for this root drawer thing, the overlays. Those were really nice findings. And summing it up, those were a really huge opportunity to dive into some of the Flutter internals. Projects like this, when you have a really awesome design team that designs so complex stuff, which, at the time you don't really think good about them, but after you make it, after it works, after it's beautiful, it's just really, really good to have all of those findings and learnings. And this was my presentation. And this is actually Ditto, our application's mascot. Any questions?
All right, I will just say that we are now going to answer questions from the people present here in person, but we are then going to come back and answer also questions from YouTube, including for the questions which were asked for the previous presentation about the Flutter at Scale presentation. So stick around if you're waiting for those kinds of answers. But now for the first question.
Hi, Albert. So first of all, thank you for the presentation. It was very insightful. I have two questions. One is, you mentioned a little bit regarding Figma and how you communicate with design team. So the first question is, was there anything besides like company policy stopping designers to just randomly update the designs, update the item designs and then like change everything in the app? Like, did you have any process in place to like prevent some random changes? So that's the first question.
Okay, so we actually did have a process. It wasn't some kind of a constraint, so the designers had to play by the rules. But every change that was made to those components needed to be put in this Kanban board that we made in Figma. It was a really hard rule. Without it, there was no change. Sometimes in the first part of the project, I was receiving some messages from developers that, hey, okay, so I want to make this screen, but this component doesn't actually look like the one in Figma, So we had to enforce it. But after some time, everyone started to respect it, to understand why is it that crucial. So that's how we managed it.
Okay, yeah. So then the second question, with having like such rich design system, it's like first thing that came to my mind was, do you have any like golden tests or things like that to ensure the design system and that the widgets that you use are not changed by accident? So yeah, like, did you have any like specific like probably golden tests or like widget tests to be sure that like you don't break anything?
Very good question. We were thinking about introducing golden tests, so no, we didn't have those. And why? Because golden tests need to have those reference images, those golden somewhere, and having them in a repository was quite a problem because the repository size would be huge, and everyone cloning it, it just wouldn't work. And when we were doing some research on the infrastructure for this, we decided that we don't want to try that. And regarding the tests, some of those widgets had a widget test, no unit test because there were no business logic, but widget test. But regarding the accidental changes, well, actually, because all of those widgets were separate, weren't connected to each other anyhow. Those were the atoms, the molecules, this atomic design. Every time that we made a change, we of course tried it in the storybook. Sometimes even looked in the app, which isn't important for that thing. And we didn't actually had any problems like that. So I guess this is this separation of concerns that all components are really independent from each other. That we only focus on a component and not on a piece of this screen.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience? Okay.
Hi, great presentation, great work. Have you heard about the WCAG? This is a web content accessibility guidelines.
Did we address it? Do we respect it? At the very beginning, we didn't think about it, which was actually not a great idea. But thankfully, we weren't really far from complying with those. The colors that the designers chose were compliant. The contrasts were okay. We're passing this AA, WCAG AA rules. There were some places where we had to, increase the line height, make something more clear, more visible. But all of this was possible to the audits that we had later in the project.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, any more questions? We now have time. Okay, I think that's it for the questions from the in-person audience, but we have more questions from YouTube. So for the first one, oops. How did you solve the Figma export, the image assets? How did you export illustration/icon assets with colors that have day-night mode variants?
Okay, so those navigation icons, as an example that you could see, they were all just one color, and those were vector icons. So once exported, I could easily set the color for this in Flutter. That was, we use the Flutter _SVG package for this, and this exposes the color parameter that just overrides any color that is used inside this vector icon. And for the for other raster images, we just had the light theme and the dark theme counterparts inside the application.
All right, so you had the ready-made assets for that.
Yeah.
Second question is, would you use text button instead of elevated button? You needed what? You needed a button with a background. Probably if you needed a button with a background.
Yeah, actually, it doesn't really matter whether it was a text button or elevated button or actually anything, because in the end we rewrote it so that it didn't use the Flutter / material package at all. I just used it because it was the first thing at my hand. I had to override the background color using both the text button or the elevated button because I needed the color to be what I want. So it didn't really play big of a change.
And the last one is, what's the maximum text scale factor designed for the application? What do you do if the user says the text scale factor to 350%?
Okay, so before implementing the solution for supporting those increased text scales, we checked what text scales the devices allow the user to use. So in iOS, for example, you have this slider of text scales, and then you have a toggle where you could get access to even bigger scales. At the beginning, no, not at the beginning, it is now, we support the scaling to some extent, and when the user has a bigger scale set on their device, it just it doesn't get bigger, because simply text would be too big to give any actual information to the user, because it wouldn't fit on the screen.
That makes sense, right? Text scale factors are very fun. I had some troubles with them myself, so I know the troubles. Okay, so one big round of applause for Albert again.